The country of Nepal, located between China to the north and India to the south, is known for its majestic mountains and natural beauty. In other circles, it is known for something less alluring, its position on the convergence zone between two active tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian plate and the Eurasian plate, and the dangers that entails. That danger is most acute in Kathmandu, the spiritual, political and economic heart of the nation of Nepal, which has witnessed alarming population growth in the past decades, largely to the political and social conflict.
Welcome to the earthquake walk in Kathmandu. In this walk, I'll take you along different streets in the core area of Kathmandu and try to explain you the vulnerabilities, seismic vulnerabilities of our buildings, of our settlement, and its dynamic, how it is changing over time, how it is increasing over time, and also I'll try to excite in you a inspiration behind how to deal with such vulnerabilities, how to contain the vulnerabilities, and how to reduce them.
In the middle of the new road stands a modest monument within a small park. This earthquake monument, established 75 years ago, grimly commemorates the devastation caused by the 1934 Great Bihar-Nepal earthquake, proudly tells the stories of successful reconstruction and warns people to be prepared for the earthquakes to come. The Great Bihar-Nepal earthquake was a deadly 8.4 earthquake with an epicenter located 300 kilometers away from Kathmandu. It nevertheless killed 3% of the population and toppled 65% of the city's buildings. Kathmandu has experienced 10 earthquakes of intensity 9 or greater since the first recorded quake in 1255, which killed then-ruling King Abhay Malla. Since the last earthquake in 1934, society's collective memory of the effects of that disastrous event has largely faded, as has the script in marble plaque located at the base of the monument. This short video reveals and highlights the seismic vulnerabilities of Kathmandu, an ancient city housing World Heritage Sites and one of the most at-risk cities in the world to the effect of a large earthquake. This row of 3-story high buildings is an example of the type of construction undertaken in this business district of Kathmandu after the 1934 earthquake. The seismic vulnerability of these buildings has increased due to subsequent addition of floors because foundation has not been augmented and added stories are rigid as compared to the lower stories. Next is the cell phone towers placed on top of these vulnerable buildings make the entire edifice as well as the communication system vulnerable to earthquakes. We are at the intersection of several streets around here. The population density is very high, approximately 60,000 per square kilometer. Old and new structures mix in this area and are used for both residential and commercial purposes. To the north is a recently paved street lined with tall modern concrete buildings that are too high for the width of the road. Look at the jumble of wires hanging from the poles. These are electricity, television and telephone cables creating a hazardous electrified web. Such scenes are common even outside the core areas of Kathmandu. Now please look towards the narrow road proceeding northeast. This is one of the busiest streets in the business district of Kathmandu. A strong quake would bring down these buildings, filling the street with twisted metal and jagged rubble. Please pay attention to the building on the right, building so frail. it could fall without a quake, and yet business continues as usual. This scene speaks to the commercial importance of the space itself as opposed to the risks it entails to the occupant. It also shows how low the perception of earthquake risk is within the society.
Try to explain the vulnerabilities in this.
We will enter into one of the typical narrow streets commonly found in the core area of Kathmandu. Here we can see both the traditional and new buildings. The newer, taller buildings here are built such that the higher floors become increasingly larger. At the top end, these buildings reach out towards each other, creating a concrete canopy and essentially kiss. Terracotta cladding in traditional style has become fashionable in Kathmandu and adds to the beauty of the building. But because of lack of proper standards, this cladding is expected to fall even during moderate earthquakes, possibly injuring people in the street below. Let's enter into one of the courtyards from this narrow street. These courtyards are a hallmark of the typical architectural style of the core area of Kathmandu. Often surrounding the courtyard are several homes belonging to an extended family. One often sees several of these courtyards connected by a series of small passageways which finally lead to the street. Obviously, this layout would pose a significant obstacle for emergency evacuation or search and rescue if these passageways were to collapse. Note that the upper part of this old building has new construction rising much higher than the original 3 stories.
More space as one goes, so it is something like
the municipal code permits only 5 stories, but it is not uncommon to see buildings reaching upwards of 10 stories, constructed in this very narrow and unstable style. These narrow constructions come out from a single home being inherited by multiple sons, who then divide the home or space in which the old home occupied and rebuild to house their individual families. Now we will enter into another courtyard. Notice the entrance. Imagine trying to escape through this during an earthquake. Please look in front of you, a newly constructed 9-story building with terracotta cladding. It appears solid, but in reality, this building grossly violates the National Building Code, which only allows for up to 5 stories. Now let us turn back into the underpass and look at the 1-by-6-story building. This is an example of shocking irresponsibility showing absolutely no understanding of proper construction techniques. The underpass will be totally blocked by the debris from this building in case of even a smaller tremor. Continuing on, we enter another courtyard. On the left, you can see the water supply pipe. Traditional wells in each of the courtyards have been covered and hand pumps installed. Beside it is another pipe which is connected to the city's main water source. With Kathmandu already facing acute water shortages due to poor water infrastructure, imagine what an earthquake would do to this discrete network. Let's keep going to the connecting courtyard. A religious deity is silently observing the rapid metamorphosis of the buildings here. The difference in this courtyard is that the ground level is actually rising, with implications on water and sewerage systems, maintenance of the buildings, and possible retrofitting. We now enter into a large courtyard which is traditionally used for multiple purposes: drying agricultural products, meetings, organizing social or religious festivals, and so on. Look around, look at the difference in floor heights, the design of adjacent buildings, including the difference in the construction materials, quality control, and compliance to building code, and so on. All this ensures vulnerability to the violent shaking of an earthquake. This courtyard also houses a gutti, the traditional socio-culture network of the Newar people of the Kathmandu Valley. A Kathmandu Newar is dependent upon Guthi for getting social support and for discharging social and religious duties from birth to death. This is a great local resource. The next courtyard within this larger courtyard is devoted to the work of Guthi. At the center is a religious monument, a temple. Guthi runs a school inside. There are other clubs. There is also a section that stores sitting mats, food, cooking and eating utensils for more than 100 people during social or important religious events.
Look at, for example, look at this green building.
Now we walk around this magnificent courtyard where more vulnerable buildings are present. It is not entirely a problem of lack of resources. We saw how terracotta cladding is being used and how the heights of the buildings are being increased. The fundamental issues are the lack of awareness, lack of risk perception, and total failure of the municipal authorities to ensure the existing building codes. With each passing day, we move closer to the catastrophic event that is predicted for the Kathmandu Valley. What I showed you today is only a glimpse of a much larger picture of vulnerability that pervades Kathmandu. Vulnerability from the absence of awareness of everyday people who must demand safer construction, from the lack of diligence or education of engineers and builders on what constitutes a safe building and how it should be properly built, from the failure of our local institutions to enforce our building codes.
There ends this small glimpse of vulnerabilities, also vulnerabilities of Kathmandu and how to overcome. Please think over that. Don't forget it's our problem and we need to solve this problem. Because the earthquake monument in the center is all the time calling us. Don't forget that Kathmandu is a seismically risky settlement.
Thank you, sir.
And lastly, from our inability to remember our lessons of the past.